Have you ever felt a bit uneasy about using a pressure pot for your dice making or resin casting? You're not alone. In this video, we're going to demystify pressure pots, debunk some of the myths, and explore all their safety features. And if you stick around to the end, we'll even make some recommendations about which pot you should buy. G'day, I'm Aaron, author of the Critmaker Guide to Dicecraft. One of the questions I get asked most by new dice makers is, how dangerous are pressure pots to have in the house? Let's find out. If you're new to resin casting, I know pressure pots can look pretty intimidating. I mean, look at it, it's big, it's bulky, it looks like, well, a bomb. First time I used one, I was so scared I put on my motorcycle helmet to add the air. Figured at least if something went wrong, my head would be safe. Things have changed a bit since then, and most of that was due to the fact that I now understand them better, as I'm hoping you will soon. Fact of the matter is, pressure pots are safe and reliable tools that will improve your casting more than anything else can. So what exactly is a pressure pot? Well, it's a pot, and it holds pressure. Okay, that may be a little simplistic, but it's not far off. It's really just a sturdy, airtight container. When it's sealed and has air fed into it by a compressor or pump, the pressure compresses bubbles in your resin and silicon until they're too small to be seen. And this means perfect clear castings every time. Now, before we look too much at our pressure pot here, let's address the elephant in the room. You probably heard a lot of horror stories and maybe even seen some of these photos. Ouch. Let's clear this up. These are photos of pressure cookers. These old-fashioned stovetop pressure cookers have a reputation for doing exactly this. Don't worry, your Instant Pot is fairly safe by comparison. Pressure cookers basically use heat and pressure to cook food faster. If the safety mechanisms fail or aren't properly maintained, the pressure can build up, causing some pretty awesome explosive renovations. In most cases, the vents have been clogged up by food or over-ambitious cooks, filling the pot way past that max line. With constant heat and no way for pressure to escape, well, it's got to go somewhere. Pressure pots, on the other hand, don't use heat, don't constantly build up pressure, and there's no liquid or foods to worry about clogging the safety valves. So with that out of the way, let's have a look at our pressure pot here. First up, it's made of steel. These things are built like tanks. The walls and the lid are 5 to 7 millimeters thick. Most of these are repurposed spray painting pots. They're designed to be knocked around by tradies and maintain pressure for spray painting jobs all day. Feel that? That's solid protection right there. Each manufacturer will have a maximum PSI for this pot. Never, ever exceed this. Now, the lid, apart from doubling as a makeshift shield, sits firmly over the pot and is sealed by this rubber gasket. The sturdy locking mechanism applies pressure evenly across the lid to maintain a tight seal. When you do these up, try and do them up diagonally to ensure consistent pressure. This gauge is your guide. It shows you exactly how much pressure is in the pot, so you're always in control. Pressure on these gauges is usually measured in PSI, or pounds per square inch. As an enlightened metric user, this stings a bit, but it's the standard. For most resin casting, you're aiming between 30 and 50 PSI. I normally use 40 PSI for my resin and 45 PSI for my molds. The inlet's where you put pressure into your pot from your compressor. These have a standard fitting called Nitto, some people call it Nitto, some Nito. Regardless of how you say it, it's a standard fitting for air tools. If you're using a tire inflator or an airbrush compressor, you're going to need to find the right fitting for it. The ball valve is what controls pressure going into the pot. Turn it counterclockwise to allow pressure in, turn it clockwise to stop it. When this valve's closed, no more pressure can enter the pot. This is the pressure safety valve, and it's the star of the show. This little device will release the air from the pot once it hits a certain threshold. These devices are calibrated at a point below the maximum capacity of your pressure pot. For a pot with a capacity of 70 PSI, it's probably set somewhere around 60 to 63. This will be dictated by the manufacturer and how it's been calibrated. The mechanism itself is actually pretty neat. Basically, it uses the tension of the spring to open and close the valve. Under normal operating pressure, the spring keeps the valve closed. When it goes beyond its threshold, this overcomes the tension and forces the valve open. As the valve opens, it releases all the air in the pot to prevent any danger. Once the pressure's low enough, the spring automatically closes the valve and reseals it. Pretty cool, hey? So what about compressors? Honestly, any air compressor's fine. I got people on our Critmaker Discord using tire inflators, others using airbrush compressors. I'll drop a link to our Discord down below. Personally, I recommend something a bit more heavy duty like this one. The reason I went for this is that apart from being compact, it's only 42 decibels. In comparison, many cheaper compressors on the market are 85 to 90 decibels. That's louder than my motorcycle. There's way too many brands and variations of compressors out there, so just use what you have. If you're buying one and you're going to use it indoors, or you've got close neighbours, do yourself a favour and buy one that's quiet or silent. You'll thank me later and your neighbours will too. Now, as far as actually using the pot, it's actually pretty easy. Firstly, put your moulds into the pot and put on the lid, ensuring it's seated correctly. With the lid closed, firmly tighten up the locking mechanism. With that done, make sure you set the ball valve to the closed position, connect the air hose. Slowly open the valve and let the pressure rise gently. Once it hits your preferred pressure, close the valve completely. Now that you're at the correct pressure, disconnect the hose. The reason for this is that with the air hose removed, no more pressure can accidentally be added to the pot, meaning no chance of overpressurizing. Now, the most important thing before opening your pressure pot is releasing the pressure. Attempting to open the pot while it's pressurized could be a recipe for disaster. To do this, all you want to do is slowly open the valve until all of the pressure is released. When that gauge is reading 0, it's now safe to open your pot and check your castings. Alright, now that we've seen how simple it is to use, let's look at some of the myths. Myth number 1, pressure pots regularly explode. I can honestly say this is not true. Based on hours of research, I've only found 2 instances of pressure pot explosions. There may be more in industrial settings, but these are the only 2 I can find in home pressure pots. Regardless of what the owners say, in both cases this was due to user error. They went far above the manufacturer's recommended PSI, and the results were honestly to be expected. As you've seen, these pots are designed with safety in mind. If you're following the guidelines and periodically checking your relief valve and seals, you've got nothing to worry about. The pot's rated to 60 psi like the Harbor Freight pots. Don't put 80 psi of pressure in it. Myth number 2, pressure pots are only for use by professionals. While pressure pots are often used in professional settings, they're also regularly used by artists, hobbyists, and the DIY crowd. Again, following the recommended guidelines, they're safe and easy to use by absolutely anyone. Myth number 3, pressure pots require constant maintenance. While I agree that stovetop pressure cookers should have constant maintenance, pressure pots really don't. All you need to do is periodically check the rubber seal, make sure the safety gauge is working, the relief valves move freely. That's it. So what about common issues with pressure pots? Like any airtight system, probably the main frustration is air leaking. For resin casting, you want to maintain pressure until the resin is well and truly at the end of its gel phase. That usually means 12 to 16 hours of maximum pressure. If you find your pot isn't holding pressure for that long, then chances are you have a leak. Now, finding leaks is actually pretty easy. Just grab a spray bottle with water, a few drops of detergent, spray it around the fittings and see where the bubbles are. See that? That's not sealed correctly and is leaking out. To fix the leak, you're going to need to remove the fitting using a wrench and replace the PTFE tape. Honestly, this tape isn't the best thing for the job, so if you've got a leak, I'd highly recommend using a dedicated pressure sealant instead. Works just like Loctite, you spread some around the fitting and wait 24 hours for it to fully dry. Honestly, most of the pots I've had have had leaks from the manufacturer, so it's worth checking out even on a new pot. Alright, if you're enjoying this video and you want to get more resin and dice making tips, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Alright, now you've stuck around this long, so what pressure pots do we recommend? Unless you're doing really large casts, most dice makers use a 2.5 gallon or 10 litre pressure pot. For those in the US, I'd recommend the California Air Tools pots. In fact, if I could buy them here in Australia without paying hundreds of dollars for shipping, I would. They're well made and they're rated to about 80 psi. I've had plenty of great feedback from other dice makers about these pots. They'll set you back around $200 US. You can get some pretty good discounts when they're on sale, like Black Friday. While the Harbor Freight pots are about half the price, they have a much lower rating of 60 psi and you're going to need to modify the fittings. This can really add up to the price, so go for the quality pot if you can. For those of you in Australia, I'd definitely recommend the Black Ridge pots from Super Cheap Auto. You'll have to modify the fittings, but they're rated to 80 psi. These will set you back around 280 Australian dollars plus another 40 or so for fitting. They regularly go on sale for 30% off. If you're not comfortable changing the fittings, the next best bet is the Resin Pressure Pots from Vevor. They're generally about 180 Australian dollars, but they've got a max rating of 70 psi. Both are great pots and they're used by plenty of Australian resin casters. Whatever you get, make sure it's a quality pot that's well made with the highest PSI rating you can afford. Now, if you're curious, the max PSI is usually dictated by the strength of the materials in the welds as well as the quality of the fittings. If you have a casting project that needs more PSI, you're going to have to upgrade to something a little more industrial. There's absolutely no at-home modifications that will allow you to do this safely. Alright, we've covered a lot in today's video. Let me know in the comments down below how you felt about pressure pots before watching this and if you're feeling a little bit less worried now. In next week's video, we're going to be digging into every dice maker's favourite and most controversial topic: balanced dice.